devoted organizer. This week his mother passed away, so he cannot join us. We are very sorry for his loss. And Iki is kindly enough agreed to take care of the technicalities. So hello everybody, and let's join the session.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Geshe.
Sure. Just a second. Just need to look for the material. We've got the prayers, right? We have the prayers. Yeah. Okay, great. So we'll start as usual. We'll start with some moments of breathing, 2 minutes of breathing meditation, just to be able to let go of any disruptive thoughts, any thoughts about the future, any thoughts about the past, and to just be in the present moment to get ready for this class. And now to generate the right kind of motivation for this session, let's think that right now we have so many opportunities, freedoms, and also the wish to transform our mind. And so to utilize this opportunity that we have now, to think that may this session become one of the causes that enables me to generate compassion, love, as well as the correct understanding of emptiness. So that I'll be able to remove all the obstacles, all the obstructions of my own mind. And for the welfare of all sentient beings, attain the state of a fully enlightened Buddha. So with this motivation, let's recite the prayers. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And then the 4 immeasurables. And as usual, I'll keep a break. I'll read one line and give you the opportunity to briefly meditate on its meaning and to also generate the wish, may I be able to bring this forth. Or rather, I will bring this about. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Okay, great. All right. Now, the Heart Sutra is such a beautiful text. Um, I just spent this weekend teaching it in German, and just because I had to put it all together into a few hours over those last 3 days, it's just such an amazing, wonderful text. It brings it back to me how beautiful it is going through it all over again. But of course, what's so important is not to forget that although it explicitly describes wisdom, describes emptiness, implicitly, of course, it also mentions love, compassion, generosity, and all these other positive qualities. So we should never meditate on this without, in some way or another, bring in compassion, etc. So if you recite this text to initially generate compassion, generate bodhicitta, and then if you reflect upon these words, if you read it slowly and reflect upon that which you've learned, it becomes the full practice of method and wisdom. Okay. Now we actually got to a part of the sutra. So just to remind you, to remind myself, we got to. So we went through the title of the sutra. We talked about the homage by the translators, and then we started with the actual sutras. So the main body of the sutra. You have the common prologue. So there's a prologue initially just to introduce to us what's going on, to let us know what are the backgrounds of the sutra, of this situation. In particular, it feels like we're supposed to visualize we are in this place. We're there, right there in the presence of the Buddha. And I've talked about this before, that we just visualize we are in the present of such an inspiring being who's got all the wisdom, all the compassion that a being could possibly generate. And that actually the power of visualization is such that scientists have found that the same areas in the brain are activated when we visualize something, then if someone actually experiences that which is visualized. So the example that is given in terms of there was an experiment at Harvard University some years ago. They took a group of people and they divided them into two. And one group was taught a piece of music with one hand to play on the piano, and they had to learn that piece of music for 2 weeks, and afterwards they did a brain scan. The other group was told to take that same piece of music, but instead of playing it directly, they were supposed to visualize it. And in the end, the part of the brain that was activated and therefore enhanced whatever it was that happened, the synapses, the connections, etc., they were all enhanced. But in both cases, they were so similar that it was hard to tell the difference between those that had actually practiced this piece of music and the ones that only visualized it. So this is beautiful because it's helpful for us to actually do these visualizations and not just think, oh, I'm just visualizing, it's not really happening, it doesn't have any effect. No, it's got a great effect on our mind. And if it has an effect on our mind, as a result of that, of course, it impacts our brain. We're less interested in the brain, but of course, in the sense that it creates new pathways in the brain, etc. So it makes it helpful for us to do it again in the future. But more importantly, if we just visualize it, it is as if it happened. So Tantra works, all these different methods, they actually work. The scientific evidence has been given again and again, or has been found to is there again and again with different experiments. So basically we visualize with this common prologue, that is given at the beginning of the sutra. We get a sense of what's going on, visualize ourselves to be there. And there's the common prologue, which basically describes the excellent speaker, the excellent place, the excellent time, and of course, the excellent audience. Again, very inspiring for us. And then there's the uncommon prologue, in which the sutra, that is Ananda actually, he's like the narrator of the sutra. He explains what the Buddha was doing. It's uncommon because it wasn't obvious to everyone present that the Buddha was absorbed into that special concentration that inspired everyone. At the same time, Avalokiteshvara was also meditating on emptiness, getting ready basically to answer this question. And then, of course, the actual sutra starts with everyone being inspired. So Ashayaputa's question with regard to how should a person of the Mahayana lineage, how should such a person practice the profound perfection of wisdom? So again, implying someone who has generated either compassion or has generated bodhicitta, both the two interpretations of those words. So how should the son of the lineage of the Mahayana lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? So asking only about a son of the lineage, but in response, Avalokiteshvara, of course, says any son or daughter, stressing the fact that no matter what your gender is, if you practice the profound perfection of wisdom, if you are a son of the lineage or a daughter of the lineage, that is, if you have generated great compassion, or you've generated even bodhicitta, then you should practice the profound perfection of wisdom in the following way. You should correctly and repeatedly behold, that is repeatedly here, basically use inference to behold those five aggregates. Also, on top of the I, holding the five aggregates, the I most importantly, but also the five aggregates as empty of inherent existence. And then that's just a brief explanation how to explicitly understand emptiness, but also how to train on the first two levels of the Mahayana path, on the path of accumulation and preparation. And then the extensive explanation is given of the four profundities, with the words form is empty, emptiness is form, and so forth. So Avalokiteshvara here describes the profundity of the ultimate, the profundity of the conventional, the profundity of the true truth being inseparable, being one nature, and the profundity of the true truth being nonetheless nominally different or distinct. Okay. Then the next part, oh no, and then he says in the same way, so just as form in this case, our own body, just as our own body doesn't exist inherently, the self, of course, implied, self is empty, emptiness is the self, etc. And so in the same way as this is true for the self, it's true for the body, in the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition of factors, and consciousness, they are empty. All right. So we discussed these mental factors. Sorry, we discussed these aggregates. We discussed the emptiness, the four profundities. But now the next part is an explanation of how to train in the perfection of wisdom on the path of seeing. I did mention before, I said that on the path of accumulation, what is it? How do you enter the Mahayana path of accumulation? By generating the wish to become a Buddha for the welfare of all sentient beings. That is said to be the entryway into the Mahayana path. Once you've generated that type of mind effortlessly, such that through habit, through again and again habituating yourself with great compassion, with the altruistic attitude, I myself will lead sentient beings out of their suffering. With this kind of attitude, then at some point you understand that Buddhahood is just a means to an end. What is the means to that end? Well, what is the means? It's a means to be able to work towards the benefit of the sentient beings most effectively. And once you become a Buddha, your end has not been fulfilled. Now you start working for the benefit of sentient beings most effectively. But in order to actually get to Buddhahood, so once you're in the Mahayana path, you need to realize emptiness. Maybe you've already realized it before, but if you haven't, you need to realize emptiness, and you can only do so conceptually initially, through an image of emptiness that you develop. It's like, to give you an analysis, I've given that to you before. It's like pointing at the moon with your finger. All right. So initially, before we hear about emptiness, of course, we receive a teaching on emptiness by way of the Heart Sutra, for instance, or any other teaching of the Buddha, by the Buddha. And so what the Buddha does, actually, emptiness is described to be undescribable, inconceivable, etc. But only for our mind right now. And of course, indescribable, because words cannot exactly describe what emptiness is. But these words point in the direction, point us towards emptiness. So we use those words, and at some point we have to leave those words behind and just get at the meaning until we realize emptiness itself. So basically what the Buddha did, he took his finger, he was like pointing at the moon. The moon is like emptiness, but if you can't see emptiness, we can't see the moon right now, we need a finger that points it out. So when we first start studying the Dharma, we try to first understand the finger, as in like, what is the meaning of all these words? But once we've understood the meaning of those words, we reflect upon it, we understand the meaning, then we use our own finger to point in the direction of the moon, which means we generate a conceptual mind, the kind of mind that remembers what we did yesterday, that reflects upon things, thinks about them by way of a mental image appearing. In the same way, if I ask you, think of a red flower, actually a red flower appears to your mind, and that is the general image of the red flower. So likewise, emptiness appears to your conceptual mind, and through this appearance and in dependence on a lot of reasoning, a lot of contemplation, you eventually realize emptiness conceptually. So this general image that you generated in your mind That is like your own finger is pointing at the moon. And now what you're doing is you're understanding the moon, you're pointing at the moon, so your conceptual mind understands the moon and the finger. The finger is just that general image of emptiness, just points you in that direction. And now both of those are mixed. To your mind, there's the general image of emptiness plus emptiness itself. And in that way, you can conceptually understand emptiness. Now, that is not enough. Why is that not enough? And that's implicitly taught here, in the sense that the reason why we suffer, the reason why we have all the problems that we have right now, the reason why we have afflictions such as anger, jealousy, etc., the whole list of different afflictive emotions. And the reason why we're not liberated, the reason why we're not a Buddha yet, is not because we don't have everything that is needed to become a Buddha. We do. We have this pure mind that actually has the same nature than a Buddha's mind, in that it's clear, it's knowing, it can know anything. It can experience love and compassion towards everyone. But right now, it cannot do that. Why? Because due to our wrong view with regard to reality, due to our habitual apprehension, our habitual grasping at inherent existence, independent, objective existence, that mind led to other types of wrong views. And in particular, it gave rise to lots of negative and harmful emotions that just harm us greatly. They harm us more than anyone else. So how can we remove those? If we believe there's a ghost underneath my bed, okay? If you're sitting on a bed, I'm sitting on a bed right now. So if you believe underneath your bed or in your closet, there's a ghost, and that then gives rise to all sorts of other wrong views, assuming there is no ghost underneath your bed. So it gives rise to all these other wrong views, to lots of emotions, fear and anxiety and attachment and all that, different range of different emotions. Now, how can you get rid of those emotions, of all these other wrong views? How can you get rid of them? By tackling the root. What is the root? The view that there's a ghost underneath your bed. So obviously, if that is the main cause for all these messy emotions, we need to focus on that wrong view. And how can we remove that wrong view? We can take a sleeping pill. We can watch a movie, distract ourselves, meditate on just concentration, shamatha, so we're not thinking about it. But of course, that's just a temporary solution. The only way to really remove the wrong view that there's a ghost underneath my bed or in my closet is to check, is there one or not? So to generate the understanding that there's no ghost underneath my bed. It's as simple as that. So the mind that realizes there's no ghost underneath my bed is the obstacle, is the antidote to realizing, to the antidote to the wrong perception that there is a ghost underneath my bed, and to all these other emotions. So likewise, why do we try to understand emptiness? Because emptiness is the only antidote that enables us to remove our ignorance with regard to reality. However, our wrong view of reality is so deeply rooted in our mind. It's not just on the conscious level, even on the subconscious level. On the subconscious level, which in preparation for the last teachings by His Holiness, which I translated when His Holiness talked to the Mind and Life Institute, I had to do some reading on subconscious mind, etc. And I found that the subconscious mind is 200,000 times faster than the conscious mind. And our wrong view of reality, it pops up so often and all the time, we're not even aware of it. I mean, what do you expect? 200,000 times faster than the conscious mind. So we've probably had, what's it called? ignorance. We've had ignorance possibly within the last few seconds and we're not even aware. So the point is, our mind is so complicated, so incredibly intricate and complicated with conscious minds, subconscious minds, etc. But the point is, all these minds are affected by our wrong view with regard to inherent existence. So we're up against a very powerful force, a very powerful misapprehension. And since that is the case, just once or twice realizing that phenomena don't exist inherently won't really tackle that mind. So it has to become stronger. It has to become more intense. How can we make it stronger? First of all, generate shamatha, or a type of concentration that is so powerful that you can stay focused for at least 4 hours. So that's what you have to generate on the path of accumulation if you haven't generated yet. If you haven't generated it yet, so generate that type of shamatha. And once you've done that, you try to bring together that deep level of concentration with your conceptual understanding of emptiness. Now, although the object is the same, it's the same understanding of emptiness, but you can tell if the mind is more focused, right? It's much more powerful because, like, like a laser beam where the lasers are all bundled together instead of kind of spread out, like light that is brought together with this intensity. It's much more intense than light just being all over. And that's true for anything. Heat, if it spreads out, it's not as powerful as if it's bundled together. So in the same way, our mind, if it's brought together without distraction going here and there, just focused on emptiness, well, then that mind is already much more effective when it comes to acting as an antidote to our root misapprehension. So once you have been able to do that, once you were able to bring together this concentration, shamatha, and unify it, bring it together, the function of concentration, you unify it, you bring it together with the function of realizing emptiness, insight, which is, in other words, a union of shamatha and vipassana. Once you brought those two together, you have reached, by definition, the path of preparation. Now you're on the second level. What's the criterion for moving to the next level, the path of preparation, that you've brought together. It's still just a conceptual understanding of emptiness. However, you've brought it together with this really deep concentration. Well, is that sufficient? The path of preparation? Well, the concentration part, absolutely yes. But you still have that general image. The general image is still between you and emptiness. In other words, the finger is still part of your perception of the moon. You just want to see the moon directly instead of the finger always being part of that perception to fully understand the moon. So likewise, our general image of emptiness, which is not emptiness itself, is just a representation of what we think emptiness is. In the same way as the flower, if you think of a flower, yeah, you can think about a flower, you can recognize a flower by way of this image of a flower appearing to you, right? Right now, but that's not an actual flower. So you want to experience emptiness directly. So for that, through habituation, you meditate more and more. It's just a matter of becoming more familiar with emptiness again and again and again. Meditate, until at some point, the general image will just fade. It'll become weaker and weaker until eventually, very clearly, emptiness appears to you. And then you've reached the path of seeing. So please don't forget that. That part is really, really important. It's really important. Okay, so implicitly, the next words that we started last time, when it says Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. These words describe implicitly this path of seeing, when you directly realize things, okay? Direct perception. And why this is important, I'll say a little bit more. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But here now, what's so beautiful about this statement, about this sentence, it's actually really difficult to understand, but still, it's not impossible to understand. It just takes a little bit of time to think about it, but it's really effective. I almost find it's more effective than saying form is empty, emptiness is form. To some of you, I'm not sure. But basically, what Avalokiteshvara says here, he talks about emptiness in a slightly different way than before. Previously, what did he say? Well, he basically said our body doesn't exist inherently. In the same way as we usually say, well, the table doesn't exist inherently, and the cupboard doesn't, and I, of course, doesn't exist inherently. None of those things have any inherent existence that can be found, anything concrete that can be found. So here, in the same way, Avalokiteshvara, addresses emptiness, but in a slightly different way. He describes here, they're sometimes called 8 profundities or 8 aspects. So the first aspect is emptiness. Okay, it's just emptiness. We've already talked about it. So it's counted as one of those 8 aspects, though actually I'd rather actually have to say it's just 7. Okay, so without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, and so forth. So what do those mean? I've already explained some of this, but I think it's so important. I just quickly want to go through some of them. How far did I get last time? Can someone remind me? How many of those words did I explain? Without characteristic, unproduced, and unceased. Did I get that far? No? I don't remember, especially now with this weekend talking the whole time about it. I'm no longer sure what I said and what I haven't said yet. Have I talked about no characteristic? Yeah. We did a little meditation on that, right? About no characteristic of the I, etc. Okay, great. All right, but I'll say it again because some aspect that I haven't mentioned yet is, for instance, when we talk about characteristic, there are 2 types of characteristic. There are general characteristics and specific characteristics. General characteristics are those that we have in common with other phenomena. For instance, we say, I'm impermanent and you are impermanent. So we have in common the fact that we're both impermanent. We have that in common. But then we have these general characteristics, of course, that we share with others. So impermanence is one, being a person, being a human, not wanting to suffer, etc. And then we have our own specific or unique characteristics that only you have, that no one else has. Okay, so your unique characteristics in that sense. You could also go in a kind of more abstract way. You could say, well, your own impermanence. So in general, we can say I'm impermanent and you are impermanent. And so there's a general characteristic. But then we can be more specific and say, my impermanence is not your impermanence. Okay, because when my body, my mind changes, that changeability, that changing is not the changing of your mind and body. Okay, so we can be specific, but only on a conventional level. If we talk about characteristics, we talk about general characteristic and specific, unique characteristic. Okay, so we understand all that. But to be honest, if you hear again and again the impermanence of my body or the impermanence of myself, how does that appear to your mind? Does it appear like a little, in German I use the word, a little dumpling? You know dumplings? What are dumplings in Hebrew? Dumplings, these little round things.
Kuftaot.
Huh?
Kuftaot.
Kuftaot. A little kuftaot. Are they sticky? Are kuftaots sticky? They're sticky, right? All right. So these kuftaots, okay. These kuftaots, these little dumplings, right? It seems like they're stuck to us. It's like my impermanence is like a little kuftaot that kind of sticks to me. Like the sense of like I have this characteristic of a kufta, like characteristic of being impermanent. It appears to us as if it was like something solid, round, whatever. It doesn't have a shape necessarily. I'm just using the meta for the example of the kuftaot. But the thing is, it seems as if there was something kind of concrete that I call impermanence, right? When I talk about the characteristic of being a woman or a man, it seems there's some kuftaot, my femaleness within me, that is inseparable from me, right? And we are part of this general kuftaot, all women, right? Therefore, whatever happens to one woman happens to all of us, right? The sense of like, we all have this womanness inside. So here, I'm not saying there's something wrong with being loyal to other, no, but it's just our sense of perception. There is this being a woman within me. There is this being impermanent. But let's look at this. What is actually impermanence? This quality of impermanence. It's the name we give to a continuum. For instance, if I take my body, the impermanence of my body, it's a continuum of my body. Let's say my body from this morning to this evening. Because each moment is slightly different to the one before, therefore, I impute the word impermanent. On the basis of each moment being slightly different, based on that, I say my body is impermanent. There's no kufdot, some kind of impermanence that's kind of attached to my body that I'm carrying around. No, it's just the name I give to a continuum, that is just not the same from moment to moment. Based on that, I label impermanent. That's a characteristic of being impermanent. How about other characteristics? How about the characteristic of having a tall body? Is there some tallness to be found? Is there some characteristic? And of course, when we say anything about my body, when I talk about my body, basically I'm talking about the characteristics of my body. If I ask you, describe my body, you're going to describe characteristics of my body. Okay? If my body existed inherently as an inherent independent body, you wouldn't have to talk about anything other than the body for another person to understand it. But in fact, you need to talk about characteristics about something other than the body to show to another person what is meant. Just because the body doesn't exist inherently, it depends on other things, even if you just want to describe it. So it depends on characteristics, but even these characteristics are only labeled. Like I said, the impermanence is not some kind of dumpling. It's not some kind of kufdaot or whatever. I've already forgotten how you say in Hebrew, but I think that's what I remember. So the point is, it's really just the name we give to a continuum of moments, with each moment being slightly different. Therefore, we say the body is impermanent. It's its impermanence. And when we say the body is tall, again, it seems like there's a tallness within the body. No, it is in relation to a shorter body that I talk about this body as being tall, or this body being short. In relation to a taller body, I say it's tall. There's no tallness to be found. So the characteristic of being tall cannot be found in this body. The characteristic of being short cannot be found in this body, right? Found in the sense there's something concrete there, the way it appears to me. Oh, this is a short person. Cannot be found. Any characteristic, right? When you say thin or fat, well, again, it's in relation to someone else, right? If everyone weighed 300 kilos and you weigh 150, Yeah, we're probably anorexic, right? I mean, in comparison to that, or in the sense you're thin, you're definitely thin, thin and fat. So we believe, oh, my body is intrinsically there's this thinness only right here. No, it's just a word we apply in relation to something else, another body, thin, thinner, etc., or bigger, bigger than myself. So therefore, any characteristic, no wonder the I is merely labeled. Well, it's only labeled on the basis of certain characteristics, or the body is merely labeled on the basis of certain characteristics. But these characteristics also cannot be found. For instance, changing moment by moment, being a man, being female. Where's the femaleness within me? I label female on the basis of certain body parts and a certain attitude. That attitude is not a woman. That body is not a woman. That body, breasts, etc. is not a woman. But labeled on those body parts that I have, my conventional I has, I label female. No femaleness to be found. In relation to my husband, if I had a husband, I would label myself a wife. So all my characteristics, any identity, anything that I ascribe to myself, that I believe in, my self-identity, which of course is important. We need to have a sense of identity, but a healthy sense of identity. But to really understand how the self doesn't exist inherently, well, let's face it. Everything you think about yourself is only relative. You are in relation to, when you say, I'm not good at that, okay, I label, I'm not good at that. But there's the big danger, because not only do we merely labeled, I'm not good at that, in relation to something, we believe now I'm inherently not a good person. I'm not good. I'm not intelligent. We believe this has got nothing to do with me labeling I'm not intelligent because I cannot do mathematics quickly. In relation to that, I may label that. And I ignore all my other abilities. I totally ignore all my other abilities because I may not be good at one thing, but I'm really good at something else. But since I've already labeled I'm stupid, I was not exact enough at saying I'm stupid. I should have been more precise. I'm stupid when it comes to algebra, or whatever, calculus, okay? Which happens to be totally true. I'm totally stupid when it comes to that. So calculus, I don't even know what calculus is, to be honest. I know this because I heard it so many times. So I'm absolutely stupid when it comes to calculus. Okay. But I'm not that stupid when it comes to making, what can I make well? Oh, fruit salad. I'm quite good at chopping fruit salad. My mom wants me always to make the fruit salad because she can't be bothered to chop the vegetables. Every time she tells me, no one makes fruit salad like you. All I'm doing is I'm chopping them and putting them in the bowl. But, so the point is here, I'm quite good at making fruit salad, for instance. So the point is, I'm labeling, I'm good at something, but what we do is we label and then believe it's got nothing to do with me calling it that. There is some kind of intelligence within me or some kind of stupidity. And our self-worth, our self-confidence is determined by these labels we give ourselves, which are often not precise at all. I'm not good at one thing, but I may be good at so many other things. And we focus in on that and believe to be just that. It's intrinsic within us and I can't change it. And that's just who I am. And I don't like myself. Totally unnecessary self-hatred, totally unnecessary unhappiness. And our incredible potential gets totally restricted only because I label a certain characteristic, which this characteristic is often too rough and coarse, which doesn't allow me to see myself fuller and doesn't allow myself to understand I can change anything. If I don't know calculus right now, I don't know how to make a proper fruit salad. Well, I'll show you. I'm kidding. No, but the point is therefore, a lot of our self-perceptions, and of course, it all starts with ourself. If I want to be more loving and more compassionate towards others, I have to be more loving and compassionate towards myself. If you catch yourself being hard with yourself all the time, if you can't be forgiving with your own shortcomings, how can we be like that with others? So, one of the first things we have to learn in Buddhism is to become our best friend, to be happy with yourself. Of course, there's room for improvement. No one doubts that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be practicing, etc. But to be okay with who we are. I'm okay the way I am, and there's room for improvement. To not be scared, to not be angry with all these characteristics that I've labeled all the time and now believe they're to be inherently, not understanding they're merely labeled. And even though if conventionally they're true, but therefore I could change them. They don't exist inherently. Causes and conditions led to those. And if I apply these causes and conditions, then I can change. And anyway, that's just one part. It's made of other parts. And so there's nothing intrinsic, no intrinsic stupidity found there. It's just a label. Maybe not being able to make fruit salad is a sign of great intelligence in a different country. Or maybe not being able to do calculus is a sign of a very wise person. Whatever, right? It's just in relation to what other people think is important, in relation to society, in relation to so many factors. And I label then stupid. Okay, that's all right. But to know it's just a label and to not take it as inherently existent and to check, am I actually very hard on myself? Am I very hard on myself? Am I beating myself up all the time? Oh, again, I couldn't do it. Again, I had anger. The problem is when you become a Buddhist, right? Then you start getting angry about yourself. You start getting angry about yourself because suddenly, oh my God, anger is a problem. Besides not being able to do calculus and not being able to do this, now I'm also an angry person. Previously, it's never bothered me, but now it's like, whoa, that's suddenly a problem. So now I'm angry with myself because of being an angry person. I mean, it's incredible what our mind does without self to harm itself. Okay. So part of Buddhism, it starts with the self. Like I said, we have to learn to be soft with ourselves, to become our best friend, to be accepting of our failure and not to hold on to, I have to succeed, I can't make mistakes. It's fine if I make mistakes. That is extremely important. And what's also really important to loosen this sense of to not take ourselves so seriously, to be able to laugh about ourselves. That's so important, to be able to talk about our mistakes and crack and make a good joke about it. Because already then it loosens the sense, oh, me, I, and frustration when things don't work out the way we want to. Really, really important. Okay. And what helps us to be able to do that? Well, what helps us to be able to do that is, of course, to understand that the different characteristics we apply to ourselves, I'm this, I'm that, they're just labeled. Just look at them, analyze them. Where is that stupidity? If I've not been able to do something well yesterday and I label stupid, that doesn't mean I can't do it today. If I failed to do something yesterday, well, instead of calling it failure, I could call it opportunity to learn from my mistakes, right? Because that's what it is too. There's no reason why a failure could not be called instead on the same basis, on the fact that I couldn't do something. Well, I've understood that I couldn't do something, and it gives me the opportunity to learn. What were the causes and conditions that were responsible for me not being able to do something? I can learn from that. So instead of calling it failure, I can also label it opportunity to learn. And since it was never inherently a failure, and if I don't call it that, it's not even a conventional failure. It becomes a conventional opportunity to learn. This sounds very easy. I know it's really easy. It sounds very easy. It's not easy to be done, but it's possible. If you just keep doing it, just keep doing it, to understand, to analyze all the time, to stay on top of it. What are my thoughts? First of all, mindfulness with regard to your own thoughts. What are those thoughts? Catch them in the act, right? Because they're never still. Our mind is never still. There's like this whole conversation going on all the time, and emotions arise and subconscious, etc. Another reason, actually, obviously, there can't be any I. It's only doing its own thing. Our mind is just doing its own thing. And every now and then there's another mind thinking, oh, that's I, right? That's the misapprehension. So there are all these different thoughts. But we can generate a mind that learns to control all those. That's when we talk about controlling ourselves. So what is that? It's first mindfulness. Become aware of all the ideas we have about ourselves. Become aware that we hardly ever see anything for what it really is. When we see an apple, right away we generate this thought, that thought, etc. Remember last time I talked about it. Imagine you just see a photograph of a delicious plate of hummus. What happens? Right away, your mouth starts to water. Is that true? It's not even hummus. It's just a picture of hummus. So what happens? In anticipation that you're going to eat that, your mind right away starts working and you have no control over it, right? Your mouth starts watering and I'm like, wait a minute, it's just a photograph. It's not even the hummus. And still your mind is already racing. Oh, I want that. I need that. And before long, your mouth is watering. Okay? So there's all these thoughts happening because we automatically add more to things than they actually have. We never perceive things just for what they are because all these thoughts with other people, right away our mind goes in. I think like this, oh, it's like that. On this person, I don't like them. The way they're dressed, that's horrible. What a weird taste they have. Like, it's just right away judging people. First, we need to recognize that. We need to recognize that, become aware, laugh about your own mind. That's a good way. Whoa, look at this mind. Oh my God. I don't need any movies. I don't need Netflix or whatever there is, right? I can just watch my own mind. It's the best comedy there is, right? Really, it's a comedy. Don't identify with your own mind. It's just thoughts. It's just clouds. Just as you don't get angry with a dark cloud, a light cloud, right? Our mind is like the pure sky, right? Totally unaffected by these clouds. And these thoughts are just clouds, they come and go. So to just see them as that, as, changing, ever changing thoughts, and to enjoy them at least, right? Enjoy. Oh my God, so many clouds, so many, one after the other, no end. And so first to get to know them, but also to learn to be more in the present, to see the things, to see the other person, instead of having all these judgments and all these ideas about the person, judge right away, to slow it down, because otherwise we don't have the opportunity to even think about emptiness. But then also to reflect, maybe later when we're done, how did I judge this person? Was there really a basis for me labeling that person such and such? Or did I just assume here? First of all, what we do is we label, but we label correctly and we label incorrectly. Add something to the complication. Like I said, it's not simple. Our mind is very complicated. That's why Buddhism is so complicated. It's complicated because our psychology, our psychological makeup is so hugely complicated that you need a complicated explanation to be able to tackle all that. Okay, so the path is really complicated. All right, but for a reason. So therefore, what we need to learn is to slow down. Thanks to COVID-19, we actually had to slow down. Okay, really, honestly, of course, it's a terrible disease and terrible things happen to a lot of people, and no one deserved that kind of suffering, truly. But as it's not inherently a problem, intrinsically, it's not a problem. It's what our mind makes it to be. So there is this aspect of corona, of the virus, of this pandemic. One aspect is that we need to slow down. We cannot do a lot of the other things that we usually could do. And what is the advantage of that? Our mind slows down. Our mind slows down. And that is so important to actually understand better what's going on. All that labeling. What is labeling? It's just thoughts thinking it's this, it's this, it's this. And a lot of the labeling has no correct basis of imputation, has no basis of imputation. I just assume this person is a jerk. I don't know them, right? Or I cannot do something and right away I label stupid. I'm stupid. That's not a correct labeling, because the basis of imputation refers to all different minds. And I'm just labeling stupid on the basis of all of them. That's not correct. Okay? And then I believe that which I've labeled to be true. Again, doesn't make it true. Now, therefore, with regard to all these different characteristics, they are just labeled. Some of them we label correctly, some of them we don't label correctly. But let's stick with the ones we label correctly. Those are also just labeled, don't exist inherently. The general ones and the unique ones. Okay, does that to some degree make sense? Your own sense of identity, that there's nothing inherent because you cannot find it. If you were to look for it, you couldn't find it other than the thought, I am like this or like that. Even the impermanence, as I said earlier on, the impermanence, right? When I say impermanence, it's just a continuum of moments that are just not exactly the same from moment to moment. And based on that, I say impermanence, right? So there's no characteristic. When you talk about other characteristics like ethnical, like race, for instance, right? It's based on a certain skin color or a certain shape. I label a certain race. I say a certain ethnicity. I label a certain ethnicity, but that cannot be found other than that word. And the problem often is that I believe there's now this, what was the word for word for dumpling again?
Try knedlach. Knedlach.
Kneddelach. Oh, that I can say. Knedelen in the end. Kneddelach. Okay. Kneddelach. Oh, that I remember. So the kneddelach, okay, I have a sense there's this kneddelach of a ethnicity that, this person carries this kneddelach of being this ethnicity and this other person kneddelach of another ethnicity. And I somehow believe they have the same kneddelach within them. And therefore, if one of them behaves in a funny way, well, they should all behave in the same way. That's generalization. That's basically racism, right? Because I associate certain things with one person and identify that knedelig in them, I identify in the other person. All right. So hopefully we can talk about this for a month, but of course I'm not going to do that. How terrible, how boring. But hopefully that brings it a little closer, that all these characteristics, anything we think about ourselves or others, that's merely labeled. But to make it even more difficult, let's add a little bit more difficulty to it. Okay, so that aspect, something to reflect upon. But then further, to say that phenomena are unproduced and unceased. All right, something is being produced. Why do we talk about production, but something coming into existence, something arising, and something going out of existence? Well, we talk about an I existing, certain things being there, having characteristics. Now we also need to talk about these things from the point of view of coming into existence and going out of existence, right? Because not everything is there, things are impermanent, they're not there forever. Everything's changing all the time. So if everything's changing all the time, there must be some causes that bring it into existence. And then that itself, when it's there, it transforms, it ceases and gives rise to certain effects, right? Okay, now let's look at that. What's really happening? The example that I really like is the example, and it's usually given in the scriptures, of a seed, a sprout, and a plant. Okay, seed, little tiny seed. Then that becomes a sprout, and that becomes a plant. Okay, some kind of whatever, apple plant, and eventually an apple tree, etc. Okay, so you see, cause. The cause is the seed. The effect is the sprout. The sprout itself is an effect of its cause, the seed, but it's also a cause of its result, the plant. Does that make sense? Would you agree with that? Okay, so as one of the characteristics of a sprout, for instance, we say it's a result because it's a result of the seed, but we say another characteristic, it's a cause because it's the cause of its resultant plant. Okay, another characteristic. Now let's analyze that. It seems there's a seed over there. It's in and of itself a seed, and then one day it's no longer a seed. Now it's in and of itself a sprout, and then it's in and of itself a plant. And one was the cause of the other, and it seems very clear. But now let's do something. I will take the sprout. I will take a seed first of all, and I put the seed in front of me, and I take a really good camera. And every second I take a photograph. For the next week, until I have the plant, I take photographs during each second, okay? And I put up all these photographs. I put them up all over Tel Aviv, and each photograph gets a number. And I ask you, when is the seed no longer the seed, but it's the sprout? And when is the sprout no longer a sprout, but it's a plant now? And I ask you to tell me the exact numbers. If there were an inherent seed, sprout, or plant, there would be a correct or incorrect answer. Would you agree? Right? If there was an inherent sprout, if there was some sproutness coming from the side of the object, well, once the sproutness is there, there's definitely one moment is there and one moment is not there, I should be able to tell exactly that's the moment it's a sprout. But actually, it's just different things that we chose to call seed at some point. We could give it a middle name. We could call it something else. We could call it Knedelach. between seed and sprout, I determine another period that I call the Knedelach period. Oh no, it's so ridiculous, of course. But I mean, I give it just another name. I could identify another 10 periods in between and give all of them a name. Can I do that? Oh yeah, I can. I identify certain characteristics, and based on those characteristics, which I can find with this object, but not with the seed, and also not with the sprout, I can put another period in between. But actually, all of those are just labeled. None of those can be found, because in actuality, you just have all these atoms that make up the seed, and they keep changing, ever changing, and that's it. Just changing. That's it. Just changing. So, are they labeled? Are we labeling seed? Yes, we do. At some point, we label seed. At some point, we label sprout. At some point, we label plant. But we do more than that. We say the seed is the cause of the sprout. Okay? The seed is the cause of the sprout. But at the time when you have the seed, you don't have a sprout. Right? The photographs that are part of the seed, right? At that time, you don't have a sprout yet. First of all, we can't agree when it's a sprout, when it's a seed. Of course, we can't agree, because in and of itself, it isn't a sprout or a seed. So there's no right answer. It's just a matter of convention. And the subtler you go, with these photographs, the harder it is to pick the right photograph. Okay. Not just that. On top of that, like I said, we say we label onto the seed. We call it a cause of the sprout. So how can it be the cause of the sprout if at the time of the cause there is no sprout? How can it be the cause of a sprout if at the time of the sprout there is no? At the time of the cause of the seed, there is no cause. Sorry, there's no sprout. When you have the seed, you don't have the sprout, but it's said to be the cause of the sprout. but at that time, there is no sprout. Well, that's okay, because it's merely labeled. The fact that this thing continues and changes, and one we call this the seed, and one we call the sprout, therefore, we say it produces the sprout. That's it. So we label, it produces the sprout. It's not like there's a little seed, there's a little man inside, and that says, okay, now it's time, I should produce the sprout. It's time for me to start using my tools and produce the sprout, right? That's not what's happening. It may appear that way, not maybe in those words, but it may appear there's like a real production going on. The seed is getting really active. It has the potential to create this sprout. We talk about potential. Where is that potential? Again, the kneddelach in the seed, the little kneddelach to give rise to the sprout, right? No kneddelach there, nothing to be found, no potential to be found. It's just the fact that this seed, think of all the photographs, slowly transforms and becomes an object that I now call sprout. And because there's a definite correlation between the seed that becomes a sprout and not the little stone that's lying in my doorway, however many photographs I take, I will not at some point have photographs of a sprout with this little pebble, this little stone transforming. Therefore, I don't call this pebble or this stone a cause of the sprout, right? So if you think about it, we say that the sprout, just because of this changeability, we label the sprout is the cause of the seed is the cause of the sprout. And because the sprout keeps changing, and at some point we call it a plant, we label the sprout is the cause of the plant. Can any of those be found on the side of the object? Is there some kind of little kneddelach, like a little seed saying, it's me, and here's the potential, and here is, right? If that happened, you would have an intrinsic, right? An intrinsically existent seed. The same with the sprout. If the sprout were basically, oh, now I'm a sprout, or, then, okay, it's different. But of course, that doesn't happen. It's, of course, just an impersonal object that keeps changing. And we just, in terms of its characteristic that we perceive, that I also just labeled, we label seed and so forth. So therefore, there's nothing that's inherently produced. That production is also just labeled on that changeability. And even though at the time of the cause there is no result, we can still label, basically looking at both times, the time now and what's to be in the future, that the seed labeled based on what's to be in the future, we label the seed now, we call it a cause of a sprout that one day will be there. And when the sprout is there, we call it the result of the seed, although the seed is no longer there. But again, we take the whole scenario of what has happened, and based on that, we label we label this sprout to be the result of the seed. Does that make sense? I mean, maybe for some of you, that whole procedure of cause, effect, etc., maybe it's a little new, this idea. Well, actually, no. If you have any experience, of course, of farming, we know cause, effect, etc. And of course, we know if I go to bed last night and I'm grumpy, I'll wake up grumpy in the morning. The cause of me last night gave rise to me this morning. If I go to bed really happily, I'm more likely to sleep well and wake up happily. So the causes basically give rise to me today. But neither can the grumpiness be found nor the happiness be found. They're just labels given on the basis of certain states of mind. All right. So I hope it's a little bit clearer, this idea that there's no inherent production. And of course, there's no inherent going out of existence, no inherent ceasing, because that sprout, when it ceases to be a sprout, it's not really ceasing to be a sprout. In actuality, we stop calling it a sprout. That's all that's happening. Right? There's no intrinsic sprout that stops being a sprout, that the kneddelach of the sprout is being thrown out and now a new one is being taken on. No, we just stop calling it that. That's why we say the sprout has ceased to be a sprout because we stopped calling it that. So based on that, we say the sprout has ceased. Actually, what stopped was just us labeling it as sprout. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so there's therefore no intrinsic coming into existence, and there's no intrinsic going out of existence, ceasing. But let's take it a little bit further. Let's make it a little bit more difficult. Add a little bit more difficulty to it. Gets to go more subtle, in the sense that we think of something by way of those 3 stages. Something comes into existence, it remains for some time, and then it goes out of existence, right? There's a sense, okay, first there was the sprout, it was first produced, and then it was there for some time, and then it went out of existence. Do you agree? Actually, that happens in each moment. In each moment of the sprout was produced, it remains, and it ceases at the same time. It does all 3. All 3 are there. It was produced, it has been produced, it is there, it's remaining, or abiding, it's remaining, and at the same time, it's also ceasing. That's like, what? It's doing all 3? No. Well, we can label those 3 characteristics. It was produced, it is remaining, and it is ceasing. These are all the characteristics, but we can label them correctly on each moment of the sprout. Why? Why is that? Because in relation to the fact that a moment earlier, let's take the first moment of the sprout. A moment earlier, we didn't call it a sprout. Now we start calling it a sprout. Therefore, in relation to that, we now label it was produced. Okay, because now we've started calling it a sprout, we say it was produced. Then this sprout, this one moment, actually, it can be subdivided in many milliseconds, in nanoseconds, right? That moment, let's say that moment we're looking at is a 1 second long sprout, that first second of the sprout. It can actually be subdivided into nanoseconds. But because within each nanosecond that is not the same as before, we continue calling it sprout, we say the sprout remains. It's not the same sprout, but we continuously call it sprout, so we label the sprout as remaining. But because the sprout is from each moment is changing, it's moving therefore through these changes towards its own non-existence, we say at the same time the sprout is also ceasing. All that is true. All that is true in relation to certain aspects. It was produced because that first moment of the sprout, we call it the sprout. Therefore, we say the sprout was produced. At the same time, we say it ceases because from moment to moment, it's slightly different. It's sub-moments. It's made of sub-moments of nanoseconds, and none of those are exactly the same. Therefore, we say it ceases, it's on its way to go out of existence, but it's also remaining because each of those sub-moments that we continuously call sprout. Therefore, conventionally, it's produced, it's remaining, and also ceasing, right? But are any of those qualities of being produced, of ceasing, of abiding, or of remaining, are those like little knittlers that are found as characteristics of the sprout? No, not true. They're just labeled on the basis of a certain basis that actually doesn't exist in and of itself. Wow. And that's the meaning of it's not produced inherently. Actually, you could add also it doesn't remain inherently and it doesn't cease inherently. But the remain is just implied. Does that make sense? To some degree. Something to think about. All right. Okay. So, shall we meditate on that for some time? Okay. All right. Let's do some meditation on the characteristics to a certain degree, but also on what we've just discussed to really internalize that. All right. So we'll start out again. We start with some breathing, just to empty the mind, to let go of any frustration of having had these difficult ideas, etc. Any disruptive thought, just let them go. Just be in the present moment. Now take to mind your own self, and in particular, any kind of characteristic that you would ascribe to yourself. Just bring that to mind, possibly a characteristic that you either don't like about yourself, that you feel frustrated about, or a characteristic that you feel arrogant about. And now take a moment to look at it closer, to look at the parts of this quality. What is it made of? If it's a physical quality, it's made of atoms. If it's a mental quality or an ability, it's based on the mind. Can you actually find that ability or that characteristic among its parts? And could that characteristic be also labeled in a different way in relation to other factors? Could a weakness be labeled a strength from another perspective? Could strength be labeled a weakness, again from another perspective? Can you recognize that whatever characteristic it is merely labeled on the basis or in dependence on many aspects that are not that characteristic? And of course, that this characteristic does not define your conventional I. It's just one of so many. In short, we're very complicated individuals with endless characteristics, positive as well as negative, that are merely labeled. So therefore, there's no basis to be angry with those characteristics, to be proud of them, arrogant, or have attachment towards them. Since they're not as solid and concrete as they appear. And then let's take to mind the fact that our self right now, our conventional self right now, it was produced, it's there for some time, and it's also going out of existence. Just take a moment to become aware of that. Yourself right now was produced, is abiding for some time, and it's going out of existence. It's ceasing. So you're a product That is, you were produced by a former moment of your I. This afternoon's I. Any moment of an I that preceded the present moment. So any moment of the I, of your I, that preceded the present moment, the presently meditating I, is your cause. Give rise to your present I. But if you check, that preceding I, having produced you now, is merely labeled on the fact that there's a continuum of a pattern, with each moment being different, different from the previous moment. And so therefore we label cause on these previous moments, and we label producing the present moment on these former moments. Can you find any causeness or productionness in your afternoon self, other than the one that was merely labeled? And then take your present I. Can you find the characteristic of having been produced that is different from being merely labeled in dependence on your former I? At the same time, your present I, your meditating I, is ceasing, is going out of existence. That is a characteristic we label on the fact that your present I is from moment to moment changing. moving towards the moment when you're no longer a meditating person. At the time when your meditation has stopped. So, labeled on the basis of moments of an I that are never the same from moment to moment, we label ceasing or changing I. We also say that you sit and meditate, that you remain in meditation. When in actuality, each moment is different from the next. But since these moments are similar enough, we label you remain in meditation. So, in short, your characteristics, such as having been produced, remaining for some time, and changing, are merely labeled. Are not inherent characteristics of yourself. So you're not inherently produced, do not inherently remain, and you do not inherently cease. Now, to conclude this short analytical meditation, take a moment to just focus on whatever conclusion you've come to, whatever feeling has been generated as a result of this meditation. Focus on it and allow for it to sink deeper into your mind. Okay, so slowly arise from your meditation. Okay. All right, that should be enough for today on those qualities. And of course, with regard to your characteristics, so the question that always arises is, how can I take this? How can I bring these ideas into my daily life? So for instance, if you say, this person is responsible for this problem, to think, this person has produced this problem. Again, are we just labeling that? Or do I find some intrinsic production, for instance? Or think of your own characteristics. Are they merely labeled? Or can I find something concrete there with regard to other characteristics? So you've got a whole week. Part of this week, be mindful of your own mind, of your own thoughts. And then every now and then, if you catch a strong emotion, check what is the object. Usually it's a kind of characteristic. Someone is stupid, someone is rude, etc. And see whether you can find any of those besides labeling those. That doesn't make them untrue or not existent. Of course, conventionally they exist, but our anger, our attachment, our frustration grasps onto an inherent characteristic. And let's see whether that actually exists. Okay, so that's your homework for this week, if you can remember. And of course, continue to recite the Heart Sutra just once a day and reflect. Take that moment to reflect upon what you've learned so far. All right, that should be enough. A little bit over the time, the usual time, 5 minutes over the actual time. That's okay. Let's recite the dedication. Of course, to also remember what we've done today, we've not just done for ourselves, but we've also done in order to be able to remove the suffering of all sentient beings who so unnecessarily suffer and experience countless problems. So may whatever we've done today become the cause for us one day to become fully enlightened, and in that way be the perfect guide to lead other sentient beings to that very same state. And of course, let's also dedicate for Shir's mom. Let's dedicate to him and his family that they be able to overcome the suffering soon, the suffering of having lost a dear person. But also, more importantly, let's dedicate towards Shir's mom. May wherever she is right now experience peace and happiness and have a fortunate rebirth with lots of opportunities to continue to be a good mother, a good father, or in any way be a good person. So let's dedicate this from the depth of our heart. And then speak the following words. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the hopeless find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all the medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and the people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
I'm gonna go and eat some knedlach.
Thank you very much for this profound teaching.
And
You guys, I would like to remind ourselves, if you want to practice generosity or express our appreciation for this profound beneficial teaching, our way to do it is to please go back to our website, the page of the registration, and we can donate either via PayPal or by transferring the donation for our bank account. And please, it doesn't matter whether we donate 1,000,000 shekels or 1 shekel, but let's take the time and effort to express our appreciation and not take this Dharma teaching lightly. Thank you all very much. Good
Okay.
night.
Thank
Bye.
you very much. Have a good week. See you next week.
thank you, Geshe-la.
Very much.